Hi, good morning all. My name is Stella Martin, and I'm one of the mothers living with the toxic landfill in Palenville, New York. One thing I'd like to touch on this video, it's been said numerous times in our posts about the extreme lengths our agencies and individuals go to keep this toxic landfill covered so that the secret isn't revealed of the toxins. And this is an issue that is really close to my heart because of all of these deceptions and manipulations have kept my children from getting the proper health care that they require. I don't know if it'd be any different outside of New York State, but it's been inside of New York State, mostly out of Albany, where we've had major concerns and a lot of manipulating going behind our backs to my children's doctors and manipulating them. And it was a huge issue with the New York State Health Department when we thought at the beginning that they were helping us, and I would send them their doctor's information and what they were diagnosed with and their symptoms. And then suddenly within a couple weeks of the next time they saw my kids, there was a change in them, and I noticed it right away. There was also an issue with, we started seeing a New York Toxicology Department out of Albany Medical Center. And when we told the DEC and the New York State Health Department and a couple individuals with the Attorney General's office out of New York that we had been diagnosed with an exposure to industrial toxins, and my son had been diagnosed with an overdose of toxins, something changed after we had been given test orders for like heavy metals and things like that. And for some reason, I still can't get my heavy metals 24-hour urine test result back. It's one thing that's kept, number one, kept the contamination under wraps, because if they truly found all of these toxins in my children, then that would be what a lot of people are calling the smoking gun. That a lot of people aren't helping us because they believe we don't have, the smoking gun. However, that's not our fault. We have been doing everything we can to protect our families, protect the wetlands, and find out the exact nature of the toxins and contamination. But everywhere we turn, eventually we get roadblocks. There was one issue. It was last June, after I had to make a choice to get up and leave my house with my kids. It was a suggestion from numerous physicians and a couple activists, professionals that had been to the house. They saw the landfill and they saw the damage that was being done to my children. So I have numerous letters from their physicians telling us we needed to get up and leave. Since up until June, the children were seeing a medical group. They had been seeing one pediatrician from there that was really trying to help them. And at that point, these individuals hadn't gotten to them yet. And the woman gave me all kinds of referrals, numerous referrals, all over for all their different symptoms. That all the issues my kids were having, we needed to treat them symptomatically. So that's what all the referrals were. And she really cared about the kids. Like I said, they hadn't gotten to her yet. Just to read, this is my son's diagnosis: medical problems, tremors of the nervous system, thrush, unspecified abdominal pain, bilateral headaches, ADHD, which I don't believe is ADHD. I believe it's the toxic exposure and what it's done to him neurologically. Nystagmus, mouth sores, exposure to toxic chemicals, reactive airway disease, and an arachnoid cyst. My younger daughter, very similar headaches. They found seizure activity in her brain like mine through an EEG. She had mouth sores, and it's been a lot. So their physician had recommended and had referred us to all these individuals. Then that physician was going on maternity leave, and it was right around the time I had gotten the numerous terrible test results of numerous dead spots created on my brain and an extremely high level of severe cadmium poisoning. So she had left for maternity leave, and I needed to take my son in for his med checkup. And I had decided I needed to get up and go. And meanwhile, in their children's medical group, he had to see another physician, pediatrician, since she was out. And we had only seen this pediatrician one time before, and we only saw this one for maybe 5 minutes because it was only for a med check. Next thing we know, next day, there's CPS knocking on my door, and it said that the children, it had been called in, that they were concerned that I was picking my children up and leaving our house, even though I had numerous letters from physicians, that I was speaking of a landfill that didn't exist, and that my kids only had ADHD and asthma, and they were concerned that I was picking my kids up and leaving for no reason. Oh, and that I was driving my kids all over New York State for no reason at all. And I had figured it out who had called in by CPS worker when she was very concerned when I handed her the children's pediatrician medical condition list. And she said, there's a whole list here. She's like, what all do they have? And that's not even the extent of all his medical issues. And so she was very concerned. And I actually called the children's medical group the next day, and I spoke with the physician, and it was them who had called. Their physician's office called in a false CPS report. They waited for the regular physician to go on maternity leave, and they made a bogus CPS report. They said they stated that the kids only had ADHD and asthma. And meanwhile, I'm driving my kids all over New York State when I have all these referrals from their own doctor and all these diagnoses from their own doctor. I was quite baffled because even their pediatrician, who was on maternity leave, had given me a letter and had been asking me, very intently, that I really needed to move and get my kids away from this exposure. And that was one thing their medical group was concerned with. But like I said, it was a false CPS report. I did contact the doctor who had made the false report and the office manager, and they were aware. Now, this is something that pretty much the similar situation had happened twice before with the kids' physicians. So since it had happened twice before, I had noticed not to really disclose the children's medical doctor when I would hand in their medical diagnoses and such to agencies. I would black out the doctor's name, patient ID, and things like that. However, before the regular pediatrician went on maternity leave, there was a woman with the EPA we thought was going to help us. So I mistakenly gave her the medical conditions with the kids' pediatrician, who was a pediatrician at that time. For some reason, they felt like they couldn't go to their pediatrician who was going on maternity leave, so they waited for her to leave, and they targeted this other doctor in the office and the office manager. Even the CPS, when I had revealed to them that I knew who had done it and that I had contacted them, and how false it was, they noticed it. This wasn't the first time CPS has been called either. This was actually the third time. The landfill owner himself had called CPS, saying that my kids are sick all the time, so there must be something wrong with my house. Meanwhile, it's his toxic landfill that's making my kids sick. CPS came to my house, investigated my house, and myself and my kids, of course, and it was closed within 2 weeks, because they had stated to me they cannot blame me, and it is not child abuse when I'm the one trying to do everything I can to help them, and meanwhile I'm not the one who's making them sick. The second one, which is another example of the extent these agencies go, was speaking with a gentleman out of New York State Health Department, Nathan Walls, who was behind numerous accounts of neglect and manipulations with our own New York State Health Department. I had told him at one point, after having suggestions to go down to Mount Sinai Children's Environmental Hospital, so I could get the help my kids needed because they're professionals there. And I told him I was on my way down there. Their pediatrician had suggested I go down there also. She had contacted them, and he knew we were going down there to get my kids help. We walked through the emergency room doors. Within 10 minutes, they didn't even look at my kids. They didn't look at the proof I had of their diagnoses, their medical conditions, the sores in their mouths, my son's neurological damage of his eyes, running off uncontrollably. Then 10 minutes, there was a security guard at my door, and they were trying to put me in a mental ward. They called CPS. Within 10 minutes, not even looking at my kids. And from there, my daughter, my oldest daughter, myself made some phone calls, and numerous people had called down to Mount Sinai, including a Ulster County legislator and a Greene County legislator, that said, unfortunately, this is this woman's reality. You can't do this to her. She's not, she's not just claiming something that's not there. So after 8.5 hours, they did end up having to let us go. In which case CPS had come to my house again the next day, and it was closed again within a couple weeks, because it is not me that's doing this to my children, and I have the medical to back it up. What was odd was they were supposed to neglect the toxic exposure, except when we left Mount Sinai, without even really looking them over for all their diagnoses and symptoms, their clinical impression for the visit was suspected exposure to hazardous chemicals for all my children. We are all diagnosed with exposure to industrial toxins. We have, like I said, the neurological damage, but it's really tough for my kids to get the help they need. And also the test results that would really show the contamination that's present. It concerns me. Why go to these great lengths? There's been numerous times they falsified the test results. One thing with the physician who had been seeing them before, who had diagnosed their true symptoms and was really trying to help them, she just came back from maternity leave about a month ago. And I still took my kids to that medical office because I wanted to know if she knew about it. There was something about her. She was helping my kids, and I really didn't think she had anything to do with it. And for some reason, the health department didn't approach her, but they did approach the office manager. So I did make an appointment for my son, and we went down there for his med check. And I have it on recording the visit, asking her if she knew, and she didn't. See if maybe you can hear part of it.
No. I had to come in for David's med check, and the woman we saw for 10 minutes called CPS and said that I'm running around taking my kids to doctors all over New York State, and for no reason why, which is the doctors that you have sent us to, and that there's nothing wrong with my kids except for asthma and ADHD. And meanwhile, of course, the CPS reports were dropped, but it was your office manager here and that doctor we checked to see. So CPS showed up at my house the next day for bringing David here for his med.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm so sorry.
They waited for you to leave.
Who did?
This office.
Well, I think it was supposed to have just been the provider, because I don't think anybody was trying to, out to get you or anything like that, for sure.
Well, they totally falsified the CPS report.
What do you mean they falsified it?
They called CPS and said that there's nothing wrong with my children, that all they have is asthma and ADHD, and that I'm running around taking the kids to physicians for no reasons at all. While it's the doctors that this office has sent them to, the specialists, and it's their symptoms alone. I think David has 7 diagnoses. And I mean, that's just from here and what you've seen. So it was a false CPS report, and the CPS agents saw it immediately because they were very concerned when I showed them printouts and physicians' work and things like that. And they got very concerned of why this office would do that.
Wow.
And of course, it was dropped again. I mean, there's nothing for me to investigate. It's not my fault what's wrong with my kids.
Of course.
And that we moved. I don't know.
Oh, good. Thank
Well,
goodness.
we had come here and told them that I had picked the kids up because I have severe cadmium poisoning. And I found out I had the severe cadmium poisoning, and there were 7 or 8 dead spots created on my brain in less than a year. I talked to a woman who works with a Catskill Mountain Keeper, who's a pediatrician and also got into toxicology. And
That's part of it, but it went on to say that the doctor was very sorry that that happened. She was not aware of it at all, and she felt truly sorry for everything we'd been going through, which was picking up, leaving our home, sick for quite some time, many doctors and things like that. So these are the lengths that they're going, and it's quite scary. You know, it's a lot of it is the health department. We have noticed that when I was giving the health department information, that's suddenly when the doctor started acting strangely and stopped helping my kids. And it's very frustrating for me because a lot of this could have been avoided. My kids didn't have to get this sick. If they would have stopped this toxic exposure, and especially when they made the landfill owner excavate a part of it. 2 springs ago, it was very dry in the area, and my house was covered with the dust, and that's when a major impact happened to my family, on all of us, our breathing. That's when my son's eyes, the neurological damage happened, and their response was, well, you wanted it away from the wetland, which it wasn't even removed from the wetland. They only made him slant it up so the wildlife could get up out of the water. So like I said, it's been very difficult to get my kids the medical attention they really require, and it's very frustrating. Like I said, why go to these lengths if there's nothing wrong here? If they had, the health department and the New York State DEC had the water cups and they were right there next to the wetland, why did they falsify results? Why didn't they just take them from right there? And why continue to go behind my kids and keep them from having a fair chance at life? So that's just some of the extreme lengths that I wanted to describe. Thank you all very much for your support. A lot of you guys have been wonderful silver linings to this experience, and thank you all for your support.